everybody, Trevor here. You may remember that I've put SpongeBob SquarePants as number 10 in my top 10 favorite Nicktoons video. Well, to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the show, we'll be looking at my top 10 best SpongeBob episodes of all time. For this list, I'm only going to pick at least one from each of the first 10 seasons, so I won't be including any two-parters, TV movies, or spin-off episodes. This is only for episodes with a normal runtime. Now, with the short disclaimer out of the way, let's dive right into these fun and memorable SpongeBob episodes. Pun intended. Number 10 goes to Earworm. In this episode of season 7, SpongeBob becomes addicted to the musical Doodle song. He listened to it all day and all night, and he couldn't stop listening to it, so his friends tried to find a way to get him back to normal. They found the solution, which turned out to be a literal earworm. Sandy plays a guitar to get the earworm out, but then Squidward takes a turn by playing loudly and lousily on his clarinet, which gets the earworm to finally get out of SpongeBob's head. And in the end, everything was back to normal until the earworm himself decides to sneak inside Squidward's head, driving him crazy. So in conclusion, this is a very good episode because of the overall plot and characters, as well as the humor. However, the reason this is so low on the list is because season 7 was one of my least favorite seasons of the entire show, along with seasons 6 and 8 for reasons that I can't explain right now. Otherwise, we'd be here all day. Still, this is one of the better episodes of season 7, and I really just can't get enough of the musical doodle, pun intended. Number 9 is Krabby Road. In this episode of season 6, Plankton forms a band in an attempt to steal the Krabby Patty formula. Say, did you know that the title Krabby Road was a pun on Abbey Road from the Beatles? Didn't see that coming, did you? I like the parts where Squidward buffs himself up just to look more handsome than usual. He deserves good luck rather than his usual karma, in my opinion. I also like the part where SpongeBob is puzzled about the name of Plankton's rock band being named Plankton and the Patty Stealers, and says that he loves it. That scene was funny because SpongeBob usually doesn't catch on, and that's the joke they usually go with. In addition, I even like the part where Patrick Star does the belly drum, which sounds kinda cool. Oh, and did I forget to mention that the part where Plankton disguises himself as a booger was quite hilarious too? Thankfully, Plankton gets caught for stealing the formula by SpongeBob and company during the climax, and gets what he deserves in the end by being put back in prison. And because of the funny jokes every so often, as well as Squidward getting his dream body during much of the episode, this gets a pass for me. However, I put it as number 9 because, like season 7, this season has some of my least favorite episodes of the entire show, but I'll explain all that in a future video someday. Number 8 goes to the Hot Shot. In this season 8 episode, a very tiny fish named Tony Fast Jr., the son of Tony Fast Sr., arrives at boarding school where everyone seems to admire him. During the course of this story, Tony teaches SpongeBob on how to be a better driver, which is one of the best things about this episode. He's not like your typical cool kid who thinks he's better than anyone else, and he's not like Gaston from Beauty and the Beast either. In fact, he was a pretty good role model and helped SpongeBob to achieve some sort of success in boarding school. And did I forget to mention that he was a nice guy to SpongeBob for the most part? Unfortunately, Tony Fast Jr. wasn't 100% good influence on SpongeBob. There was a part in the episode where he and SpongeBob did street racing against some jerks at the traffic light, leading to some disaster. Even at the end where SpongeBob and Mrs. Puff get casts and bandages during class. But that doesn't mean that Tony Fast Jr. is a bad guy. In fact, he's actually quite neutral, much like King Louie from the Jungle Book. In other words, he's pretty cool and has a believable and quite charming friendship with the main character. And because of the friendship between him and SpongeBob, this episode deserves a pass from me, and it's one of the few decent episodes of season 8, though I wouldn't consider season 8 an overall very good season as I've stated earlier. Number 7. Plankton's Pet. This episode is my favorite one from season 9, and it's about Plankton having a pet amoeba, who acts like a dog, and saves Plankton from getting eaten by a much larger pet. Everything about this episode is so sweet and charming. I love that Plankton accepts the pet amoeba named Spot as his new companion rather than using him as a means to an end like most villains do. I also like how Plankton taught him plenty of tricks, including how to steal a Krabby Patty from the Krusty Krab. But then one day, his pet goes missing, so he gets SpongeBob's help to find his missing new friend. And in the end, Spot saves Plankton and SpongeBob once again by expanding and scaring off the other pets who are trying to harm our protagonists. So because of these reasons alone, how could I not include this one as my all-time favorite episode from season 9? I think Spot is a great new character, as well as a nice and kind pet to Plankton. This episode just shows that Plankton isn't always evil, and I think it's wonderful that he got a new friend for once in his life. I suggest you give this one an honest chance on Paramount Plus or something. Number 6 is Mimic Madness. In this episode of season 10, SpongeBob mimics everyone so much, including his friends, that he soon forgets his true identity. This is honestly the best episode in the entirety of the 10th season for a lot of reasons. For one thing, Tom Kenny pulled every role off as SpongeBob like a pro. For instance, SpongeBob's impression for Patrick was just perfect, because it sounds a lot like him. Not to mention the song, Who Am I, which I thought was an overall decent song, and Tom Kenny did a spot-on job with it too. So overall, because of Tom Kenny's vocal performances for each character mimicked by SpongeBob, as well as the song itself, this deserves the number 6 spot for being the best episode of season 10. I highly recommend you give this one an honest watch. Number 5. Fear of a Krabby Patty. This is the first episode of the 4th season, and it's about the Krusty Krab doing shifts all day and all night without any moment of rest. That's when SpongeBob starts to hallucinate everyone as Krabby Patties, including Mr. Krabs. So SpongeBob decides to see a psychiatrist who is actually Plankton in disguise and was trying to get SpongeBob to give out the secret Krabby Patty formula as usual. And during the climax, SpongeBob encounters a giant Krabby Patty who tells him to overcome his fears and that he'll always be right in his heart, which is an E.T. reference, by the way. The reason I chose this episode was because I thought it had an overall great message about overcoming your fears, especially if it's a giant Krabby Patty. I also enjoyed the running gag where Plankton keeps getting hit by pianos, including one made out of sticky notes by SpongeBob. And because of these reasons, this episode gave season 4 an overall great start, at least in my opinion. I suggest you give this one an honest chance since it's very decent. Number 4. The Original Fry Cook. In terms of season 5 episodes, this is obviously my most favorite of them all, mainly because of the new character named Jim, who was the original Fry Cook before he resigned due to Mr. Krabs being a cheapskate as usual. What makes this episode so great is that Jim is a likable, relatable, and interesting new character. He teaches SpongeBob the proper way of cooking a Krabby Patty, but SpongeBob unfortunately keeps messing up so much that Jim keeps flushing down his Krabby Patties down the frickin' toilet. Later in the episode, it was revealed that Jim wasn't planning to take SpongeBob's job at all. And as mentioned earlier in the video, the reason he left was because of Mr. Krabs being a cheapskate as usual and wouldn't give Jim a raise, and that he wanted to do bigger things with his cooking career. So in conclusion, the original Fry Cook is one of the best episodes of season 5, and it deserves the number 4 spot on this list for having a great flashback to Jim and the Krusty Krab, as well as Jim being a wonderful new one-off character in the show. I suggest you give this one an honest chance. Number 3. The Algae's Always Greener. This is actually my most favorite episode starring Plankton, with Plankton's pet being a close second. In this story, Plankton decides to switch lives with Mr. Krabs with a machine that does that. He becomes the new owner of the Krusty Krab, as well as being the father of Pearl. And during the course of this episode, things go awry when he mismanages the Krusty Krab crew, including making SpongeBob co-cashier, as well as making Squidward cook Krabby Patties, which he sucks at. Not to mention, he made Pearl cry for giving her $1 as her only allowance. What a cheapskate. Oh, and I love the very funny bit where a customer is angry at Plankton for a disgusting looking Krabby Patty ruined by Squidward, which was used as a common meme, by the way. And later after that, a naked Mr. Krabs comes in and attempts to steal a Krabby Patty. I especially enjoy Plankton's reaction to Mr. Krabs' nudity. I'm sure some of the fanboys and fangirls were like, "Oh yeah, Mr. Krabs!" Luckily, SpongeBob manages to defeat Mr. Krabs by shooting a bra at him, making him give the Krabby Patty back to Plankton. Then he later swears revenge on Plankton and company in the future by repeatedly saying, "And the next day, and the next day, and the next day." This gets Plankton to go insane and starts returning back to his point in time with a push of a button on his chest. And in the very end, he decides to eat holographic meatloaf for dinner. Overall, everything about this episode was frickin' hilarious. I love the jokes and puns here and there, especially the "oh my goodness" meme that was used on the internet every so often. I love the overall plot where Plankton tries to steal the Krabby Patty formula as the life of Mr. Krabs, only for it to go horribly wrong in the end. And those are the biggest reasons why this episode deserves the number 3 spot as my favorite episode from season 3. I highly recommend you watch it because I'm sure it'll give you great laughs. Number 2. Ripped Pants. Even though there were a lot of season 1 episodes that I happen to like, but for the sake of this episode, I'm only going to choose one of them, and that would be the famous Ripped Pants episode. In this episode, SpongeBob accidentally rips his pants while trying to lift a barbell made from marshmallows and a stick, which causes everyone to laugh. SpongeBob felt bad at first until Sandy Cheeks and Scooter complimented on his funny accident, which gets him to repeat the same gag over and over and over again until it starts getting old. The prank then goes too far when SpongeBob decides to pretend to drown after surfboarding, which causes everyone to get angry with him. He starts to feel very guilty and lonely because he thought he lost all of his friends until he met a couple other fish and a whale who felt like they're the biggest losers on the beach. That's when they decide to sing a cool song about ripped pants and learn not to be a fool, which gets everyone like Sandy Cheeks to be his friend again. And to be frank, Sandy Cheeks said it best in terms of the episode's moral. If you want to be my friend, just be yourself. Which basically reminds me of the same message as Disney's Aladdin. Bottom line, because of its great message about humor, this is not only my most favorite season 1 episode, but it also deserves the number 2 spot for these reasons alone. And it just goes to show you that even sometimes entertainment can teach good life lessons here and there. Before I get to my number 1 pick, I just want to give a bunch of honorable mentions. Enchanted Tiki Dreams. As much as I enjoyed the Tiki song in this episode, it didn't make it because I thought the overall ending was a bit anticlimactic. Bubble Stan. In terms of season 1 episodes, this one would be my second favorite, but I chose Ripped Pants anyway in terms of its overall great message about being yourself and stuff. The Krusty Towers. It got beat out by Fear of a Krabby Patty. Perfect Chemistry. I decided not to include this one because I'm actually sick and tired of fart jokes, especially in Nickelodeon shows. Still, this episode is passable compared to most season 7 episodes. Not Normal. I honestly wanted to include this one for being extremely funny, but I chose the original Fry Cook instead due to backstory reasons for the Krusty Krab. Pranks a Lot. I was gonna include this one as well, but in terms of naked jokes, I chose the one with Plankton as Mr. Krabs instead for its internet memes. Love That Squid. I was gonna include this one as number 10 because although it was nice for Squidward to have a love interest, but I chose Earworm because it's a lot more relatable and memorable because of the quote unquote musical doodle. And my number 1 most favorite SpongeBob episode of all time is Band Geeks. Ah, yes, Band Geeks. One of the most memorable and emotional episodes in the entire show, as well as in season 2. What makes this episode extremely memorable is the fact that Squidward got everyone in Bikini Bottom, including the main characters, as part of a band class because he wanted to impress his rival Squilliam at the Bubble Bowl, which is a pun on the Super Bowl, by the way. I especially love all the jokes and musical gags in this episode. They crack me up every time. I even love the part where SpongeBob tries to cheer Squidward up by being the band leader himself and teach everyone the proper way of playing the instruments. But the number 1 absolute best part of this episode was Sweet Victory, which I thought was an excellent song. Not to mention that they later used this song again in real life as part of the Super Bowl in honor of the late Stephen Hilllenburg, which I thought was overall very nice of them to do, but for some odd reason, they didn't do it right away until later on. But yeah, I think they should have done it sooner rather than later, just to be more respectful to the late Hillenburg. Overall, Band Geeks is not only the best episode of season 2, but also the absolute best episode of all time. I swear, nothing can top it whatsoever. Not even the crappy spin off episodes or any of the bad TV movies like Truth or Square. So, therefore, it definitely deserves a 10 out of 10 gold stars. I'm so thankful Squidward won in the end. Whew, that was quite a fun ride, wasn't it? Now let me know your comments down below on which SpongeBob episodes are your favorite. Do you agree with my list, or do you have your own personal preference? And if you don't like SpongeBob, then that's perfectly fine, as long as you understand why it was popular to begin with. And even though SpongeBob SquarePants is one of those shows that overstays its welcome, just like The Simpsons and Family Guy, but I'll always treasure the first 3 seasons, the first 2 movies, and certain modern day episodes that are considered good. And I'll always consider SpongeBob to be my 10th most favorite Nicktoon of all time. This is Trevor Davis signing off, and I'll see you all again in the next SpongeBob video.